AMD Ryzen 7 7700X Review. The AMD Ryzen 7 7700X is the optimal choice for most people seeking long-term, high performance at an attractive price point. Additional expenditures may be required in order to fully maximize the processor's capabilities. The AMD Ryzen 7 7700X, an 8-core and 16-thread processor, is one of the first Zen 4 processors from Team Red to launch and offers compatibility with PCIe 5.0 and DDR5 RAM. AMD's Ryzen 7000 series chips do not feature DDR4 RAM compatibility, a trait shared with the Intel Alder Lake and upcoming Raptor Lake processors. The Ryzen 7 5700X offers the new 5nm FinFET technology from TSMC, as well as higher clock speeds than the AMD Ryzen 7 5800X. The Ryzen 7 5800X has a 3.80 GHz base clock and a 4.70 GHz boost clock. The Ryzen 7 7700X has a base clock of 4.50 GHz and a boost clock of 5.40 GHz, representing an increase in the base clock of 18% and an increase in the boost clock speed of 15%. This places the 7700X's base clock close to the boost clock rating of the AMD Ryzen 9 5950X. The Ryzen 7 7700X comes with 8MB more L3 cache than the AMD Ryzen 7 5800X's 32MB, representing a 25% increase. The 10nm i7-12700K utilizes the big. Little design of having 8 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores, resulting in a thread disadvantage compared to the Ryzen 7 7700X. The Intel i7-12700K processor has a base clock speed of 3.60 GHz and a boost clock of 4.9 GHz. While the Ryzen 7 7700X cores are performance cores with a base clock speed of 2.70 GHz and a boost clock of 3.80 GHz. Overall, Intel's processors have an advantage due to the E-cores handling background tasks that can impede the performance of Ryzen 7 7700X cores. The Ryzen 7 7700X has a lower TDP than the i7-12700K and is a more efficient processor. This gives it impressive performance, especially considering its lower raw power output. It is important to note that the die housing and connectors have been modified, and excess thermal paste can accumulate on the feet of the housing if not handled properly. If you are upgrading to a new processor from an AM4 chip, you do not need to purchase a new CPU cooler. However, it is important to make sure the existing AM4 cooler can manage the additional thermal load. Additionally, you may have to consider getting new RAM as well. The Ryzen 7 7700X is an impressive upgrade from its Ryzen 5000 series counterparts, providing comparable performance to the Ryzen 9 5950X. It has strong single and multi-core performance, which makes it a powerful choice for content creation, gaming, and everyday usage. Its main competition is the Core i9-12900K and the Ryzen 9 7950X. The Ryzen 9 7950X and the Ryzen 7 7700X were released after the Core i9-12900K and the Ryzen 7 5800 by 3D, respectively, and outperformed them on certain benchmark tests. The Ryzen 9 7950X performed slightly lower than the Ryzen 7 7700X on average in our tests. We have not tested the Ryzen 9 7900X, so this may alter in a few weeks. Given its MSRP, which is $50 lower than the Ryzen 7 5800 by 3D, this processor should be taken into consideration when purchasing a gaming CPU. The Intel Core i9-12900K outperforms the 7700X with regard to multi-core capabilities, due to the differences in core count and thread count between the two processors. The Ryzen 7 7700X exhibits consistent performance across benchmark categories and provides a notable performance improvement over the Ryzen 7 5800X and AMD Ryzen 7 5700G. The Ryzen 7 5700G is structurally akin to the Ryzen 7 7700X in that it has an integrated GPU, though the TDP of 65 watts is 40 watts lower and it has half the L3 cache, resulting in its inferior performance. The Ryzen 7 7700X scored 15.12% lower than the Core i9-12900K overall, which is half of the performance gap between the Ryzen 7 5800X and the same chip. The Ryzen 7 7700X has a single-core performance that is on average just ahead of the Core i9-12900K and averages around 27% higher when compared to the Ryzen 5800X in terms of single-core performance. As for multi-core performance, the Ryzen 7 7700X achieves 33% more than its counterpart. Additionally, PC Mark 10 shows an average of 14% better general computing performance of the Ryzen 7 7700X over the Ryzen 5800X and a slight lead over the Core i9-12900K. The AMD Ryzen 7 7700X has been identified as the most suitable processor for gaming, based on our tests. Further processors are expected, however, the current offering is leading in performance. The Ryzen 7 7700X offers undeniable value, with a mid-range price that makes it worth considering even if you need to make slight adjustments to your budget. The Ryzen 7 7700X has an integrated dual-core RDNA 2 GPU, exempting users from the need for a discrete graphics card, thus making it suitable for general business applications.